Flair is a legend in his own time.
Slick Rick, the 60-minute man, the dirtiest player in the game. Ask anyone from his generation who the greatest of all time is, and the answer is almost always Ric Flair. Over 35 years, the Nature Boy crafted perhaps the most iconic in-ring career of all time. Selling out arenas, main eventing from coast to coast, and redefining how a world champion should carry themselves. You've seen Rick's show-stealing, star-making outings on global television and worldwide pay-per-view. But now, for the first time ever in one set, follow Rick in the days of the territories, traveling city to city, building a legacy that would become timeless.
What the Nature Boy wants, the Nature Boy gets.
These are the matches that made Ric Flair a legend in the making. Enjoy rarely or never before seen matches of Rick battling some of his most iconic adversaries, including Dusty Rhodes, Harley Race, Magnum TA, and an all-time classic with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat.
We played by your rules, now we play by mine.
Check out why Rick was called the greatest traveling world's champion of all time as he tours the country to prove who the man really is against the likes of Jerry Lawler, Sergeant Slaughter, and Rowdy Roddy Piper. And you cannot be a top star until you earn respect in the Gateway City. From Ted DiBiase to Bruiser Brody, check out Rick's biggest St. Louis arch rival. 9 hours across 3 discs that prove without a shadow of a doubt what's causing all this. Diamonds are forever. Ric Flair's Essential Rare Matches. Available now on DVD and digital.
I want to welcome today the illustrious one, Jon Stewart, to the show. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for accommodating my schedule and coming back from our I'm illustrious Jon Stewart, so I got to brag. Coming back from our summer vacation home in Michigan that my dad bought in 1962 for $1,000. So
Oh,
not
nice.
bragging too
Nice.
much. Yeah, but thank you. We went up and opened it, so for 4th of July and stuff like that. So yeah, so thank you for accommodating me and thank God I got back early enough and we
Yeah.
could do this today. So I'm tickled to death to be here and to speak to you and your viewers.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been wanting to get you on for a long time. I'm glad that I finally was able to find a
Me
way to get
too.
in touch with you. So, I was a fan of yours. I wouldn't say growing up because I was like a late teenager when I started seeing you, but
Yeah.
it wasn't until much later in life I started finding other footage of you that I didn't know existed. First time I ever saw you was in the AWA.
Sure.
Then I saw you later on, it was sort of recently in the last year or so. Saw you in Memphis, which I did not
Yeah.
know existed because I very seldomly got Memphis TV up here. I live in Connecticut, so we're known primarily for WWF, WCW,
Sure.
stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to know how, like, were you a fan growing up, and how did that start?
Huge fan growing up, which I think warms everyone's hearts when they hear that.
Yeah.
I remember I was a fan. I bought tickets. I snuck backstage in high school. So when I say we, I am speaking as a fan back then and still to this day to some degree. We don't take kindly to men and women entering our business that are doing it solely for money. Now, I agree. After I got in the business, you should only do it for money. After a week, should only be for money. But yeah, we it's nice to have Mick Foley's and who are a couple of other guys that really Chris Jericho. I put myself in that. I'm 10 years old. My father is a local Chicago automobile dealer, uh, and he gets tickets from a other car dealer who promoted wrestling on Chicago TV. Are you following me?
Yep.
Now, I have been watching it on TV because, folks, back when Johnny Stewart was 10 years old, there was only 4 channels: ABC, NBC, CBS, WGN, which was your superstation, but that was just our local Channel 9, and then a UHF station. So
Right.
on Sunday mornings, there were no cartoons. Can you believe this?
Yeah.
6 million people in Chicago, and you don't have cartoons on Sunday morning. It was church shows, westerns. It was unbelievable. So pro wrestling came on at around 10:30, 11 o'clock. Dick the Bruiser Pro Wrestling, which was horrible production value, but it was blood and bleached blonde hair. It was everything. It was everything. If you had to tell aliens what pro wrestling is, you would show them Dick the Bruiser wrestling in the 70s. The Valiant brothers with the long bleach blonde hair and the big sunglasses, and Dick the Bruiser with his crew cut and blonde hair. So I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. We end up going to the International Amphitheater to watch Dick the Bruiser versus Big Cat Ernie Ladd. And the amphitheater at this time is 70 years old, maybe 50 years old. And it looked like the Star Wars bar. Your top echelon of North Shore Chicago residents were not going to 55th and Halsted to watch, 10,000 people screaming in the first match, "We want blood." It was a scary crowd. And when you hear and forgive me for babbling, when you hear the old guy generation talk about how terrifying it was to go to the ring and to leave the ring down the aisle between the fans when you were a heel, a bad guy, they're not lying to you. Knives were the least you had to worry about. The amphitheater was famous for gunshots at Bobby
Jeez.
Heenan. If people can
Yeah.
remember that story that Heenan tells, constant fights. And again, 4 minutes into the first match, every month it was, "We want blood, we want blood." So my mom dresses us, my sister and I, in herself. Rick, I'm not lying. In sailor suits, white sailor tops with white pants, and my dad's in his car dealer attire of his Xander belts and his nice, band waisted shirt, and we looked like either the family that owned the International Amphitheater, we were Dick the Bruiser's lawyer and his family, or accountant, and we walked in and the record player scratch stops and everybody's looking at us like, "Who the hell are these people?" And anyways, funny story, but I was just completely captivated. I'm looking at Dick the Bruiser in the ring, Spike Huber, if you can remember that name, who looked like me when I was a young kid with my curly blonde hair. And I'm like, I remember saying to myself, "I'm doing this for a living. I don't know how long, I don't know when, I'm doing this for a living," because the spotlight was on 2 guys. Even at 10 years old, I remember saying to myself, they weren't very good. It was like when my buddies and I played wrestling. And I'm not saying that as a cut down. And I'm like, I could do this shit. Actually better than some of these guys at 10 years old. And I was. I locked up. I knew my hand had to be in the back of the other guy's head at 10 years old, where some guys were lazy. And I'm just saying, thank God for that it wasn't top notch pro wrestling, because it let me say, "You can do this, John." And it was 9 years later, I became a pro wrestler. I took a scholarship at Memphis State because I knew wrestling was popular down in Memphis, obviously.
Mhm.
Folks, in '86, to get into wrestling, and everyone says this, to get into pro wrestling in 1986, and I'm glad I'm able to tell this history, was harder to get into than the mob. You could get into the Chicago mob way easier than pro wrestling. And I'm being dead serious.
Yeah.
Because if you were an earner in the Chicago mob, well, you would be you know, they would size you up and stuff, but you were going to give them $2,000 a week of your earnings. What did they care? They weren't in trouble. They weren't going to make you a made man, but you were in the mob. And that's a true story. In pro wrestling, they didn't let anyone that wanted to be in, because they had to be assured, very important, that you, once you were in, that you would not get frustrated, you would not quit, you weren't a baby where if you didn't make the money right away or got the push, you wouldn't go to the press and spill the beans about wrestling being a work.
Right.
And you're talking about killing an industry. So think about that. Men and women, mostly men, allowing someone to come into their industry. It wasn't a sport, their industry, where one person and the right newspaper reporter could kill the territory in a instant. So very, very hard to get in. Thank God they let me in. I was trained by the Memphis legend, not the Portland, Oregon guy that's still living, the Memphis legend, Buddy Wayne, broke me in, trained me. And it was good because Buddy was the spot show promoter. So all of the boys in Memphis, Buddy Lindell, Dundee, Billy Travis, Tanaka, Paul Diamond, Tracy Smothers, Dutch Mantel, Jerry Lawler, everyone saw me take down and put up the ring at the spot shows for 3 months. Very important that people saw me pay their dues, and I could throw a punch. Nobody's getting in a Memphis ring unless you can throw a punch. So that was my start back in the spring of '86 of getting into pro wrestling.
What was it like training under Buddy Wayne?
It was hard.
How did you hook up with him?
Yeah, great story. When people, it is a motivational, it's a life lesson that you hear in the seminars that'll cost you $4,000. You want to do something. Sometimes they say, don't tell everybody your dream. Sometimes it is important. I had no contacts. So anybody I met from sophomore year of high school till I got in was, I want to be a pro wrestler so bad. So all of my fraternity brothers at Memphis State, Sigma Phi Epsilon, at Memphis State, knew I came down there to get into wrestling, and I'm going to try and get into wrestling. A fraternity brother sees Buddy Wayne shopping at the local Kroger or Piggly Wiggly and says, we have this crazy guy in our fraternity. He is down here because he wants to get into pro wrestling. And Buddy Wayne's like, Jesus, okay, he's playing Memphis State football. He doesn't sound like a schlub. And Buddy Wayne gave him his number. I met Buddy Wayne at a Denny's. He interviewed me for an hour and a half, told me some of the best stories to this day, because Buddy Wayne was the best storyteller ever and had some of the greatest stories. And 4 weeks later, we started training in his backyard. We put up the ring, train in his backyard, take down the ring, because that was the ring they used for Memphis TV on Saturday morning. The blue canvas with the green garden hose ropes. Hey, it's the truth. And it was interesting. Rick, this is a fun fact, a Jon Stewart fun fact. There's not a lot of them. No, there is. But he taught me. I was broke into training as a pro wrestler as they did in the 1930s. Because when Buddy Wayne broke in, which was 52, the person that trained him started in the business in the late 30s. So he was trained as a theatrical pro wrestler, but he was trained as a shooter pro wrestler from guys that wrestled in the 1918s and the 1920s. It was bizarre. I remember doing some moves where you'd you lay on your back and you'd have to flip your feet in a certain way. So when you were heel throwed into the corner, when you came up and you were facing the turnbuckle, you had to spin to face your opponent, but your feet were perfectly aligned that when you spun around, your feet were facing your opponent. I mean, bizarre, but it was cool. That's one of the things I really appreciate, that I was trained like a 1930s pro wrestler, which I love that fact. And Buddy was great. You know, he wasn't a dickhead. He wasn't overly strict. He knew that protect the business. I'd kill somebody to be in the business, and he knew that. So he was hard on me, but he wasn't ruthless. He didn't break my knee, and just a good guy, good trainer. And through the stories, I got to know about the business. Now, there's gripes I have with Buddy. He didn't teach me about the handshake, so guys were leery of me. Like, does this guy broken in? Because he's shaking our hand like he's a politician. He didn't tell me about, hey, you are to shut your mouth and keep your ears open for the next 3 years, period. And really, you are to keep your mouth shut. If you are to say thank you, I appreciate it, or no, sir, of anything that's ever asked of you in the next 3 years. You are to do anything that's been asked of you, and you are to help out, and you are to be respectful. And some of that he did not tell me, and that did get me in a little bit of a beef with some of the boys. Their complaint was he's too happy. He's too happy-go-lucky. That was a complaint of me because these guys were either on their way out of the business or just starting, not making any money. Here I am. My parents have some money. I'm in college. I don't really need wrestling. I am tickled to death that I am in wrestling, if that makes sense. So it caused a little bit of a rub, but I survived it.
So you started in Memphis, basically, is where you're going with that?
After that 10-minute story.
Yeah.
Memphis.
No. So how long were you there for before going forward?
I was there. I was there over the summer. They had a huge tag team angle going with the Thunderdome. And then I was let go when Jerry Jarrett started booking. He didn't want a lot of young guys to compete with Jeff because I started with Jeff Jarrett. And then I was shipped off to Dick the Bruiser, WWA, out of Indianapolis. I did that all of 1987. And then in the end of 1987, Sam DeCiro, an AWA who was called Mad Max, the Max brothers from the AWA, he started Windy City Wrestling from the ground up. And him, myself, a promoter named Alan Eppenstein, and a AWA guy, Sonny Rogers, we started Windy City Wrestling, and we're back in the amphitheater like 4 times, spot shows all over Illinois, in Iowa, in Wisconsin. We were Chicago. We were the ECW of Chicago, and it was great. And then from there, a year and a half later, Jim Barnett sees me at a Windy City show, hires me to wrestle for WCW. I had a verbal agreement with Ted Turner for 4 years at $150,000 a year. And I show up at my interview at the UIC Pavilion with my bleach blonde hair, Porsche Carrera glasses, cream-colored suit. And Ric Flair's like, who the fuck is this guy? This Ric Flair ripoff. And it killed me because he queered my deal. He negated. He said, if you need a Ric Flair ripoff, you don't need the real Ric Flair. And Jim Barnett and Eddie Gilbert, who there was a booking committee, said, okay, calm down. You know, we won't sign him. And when I didn't get signed, then I signed Vern Gagne, signed me on in 1989. So I'd worked for Vern a little bit doing TV in 88. So Vern and Greg were familiar with me. And that was really the bulk of my career trial. I started promoting on my own in 96.
I want to take a couple steps backward. You mentioned going to the WWA in 87, you said?
Yeah.
Was the Sinister Minister there at that time, or was that too early?
The Sinister Minister, my buddy. Yeah.
That's my buddy.
I mean, he was, it was weird. This was weird. The Sinister, I'm trying to explain this. I would do TV in Indianapolis, drive to Indianapolis to do interviews, 3 hours, come back, drive to Toledo with the Russian Brute. I'm sure everybody remembers him from AWA. But the Sinister and I were never on TV together or in the studios.
Wow.
So that was really, really weird. But we were on some spot shows together for Bruiser, and and he was from Chicago. He was in the car business. We were, I love the guy.
He still is, I believe. He was sent my way because I guess he sold a bunch of his tapes to the Savoldis like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And I got hooked up on because this show will eventually end up on the Savoldi network eventually. They hooked me up with him, do an interview with him. We just bought his tape library, and then they explained to me who he was. I was like, damn. And then ever since then, we've been talking, on and off for like the last 3 years. He's a great guy.
If you can text him or just tell him Johnny Stewart says if he doesn't, if he's got something bad, because wrestling, you never know. But we were just simpatico. He was a nice guy. I could always talk to him about what's going on behind the scenes with Bruiser and stuff, and in the inner politics that maybe I wasn't privy on, and I just love the Sinister. I really do. Good guy.
I'm gonna text him after I'm done here.
Please do. Tell him I said hi.
So, absolutely.
Jimmy Valiant, Boogie Woogie Man.
Legendary Boogie Woogie.
Wait a minute, baby. Wait a minute. Hang on.
What are you doing around
What was that calling you, buddy?
This is our neighborhood.
You
This
done
is a
made a
young man's
mistake.
game.
You should be retired, Boogie.
Wait a minute, boys. Let me take a bite of my king dog.
Say King Dog?
King Dog?
Is that what you said? What happened?
Come on, boy.
Don't let hunger bully you. Get yourself a king dog, and you too can become a super hunger fighter.
Secondhand Heroes and Home for Wayward Villains is a comic book shop and gaming store that also features Magic the Gathering and D&D. Located at 18184 Leesville Road in Evington, Virginia, Secondhand Heroes is your one-stop shop for you to get your nerd on. Open 7 days a week at 11 a.m. They don't close until the dice stop rolling. They buy, sell, trade, barter, and haggle, specializing in collectible toys, both vintage and modern, comics, Magic the Gathering, video games, console, and arcade cabinets to play, all set to free play. Host your game night with us. Monday night D&D video game competitions, and so much more. Something for the collector and gamer in us all. Call 434-317-0121 or shoot us an email with any questions to secondhandheroesva@gmail.com. Note, secondhandheroesva@gmail.com. That's 2ND, handheroesva@gmail.com. Come game with us.
So you did some time working for Bill Watts as well.
Yes, I did.
So this I was completely unaware of when I was doing my research.
Yeah. After when Jerry Jarrett was cutting us loose, I'm very proud to say Dutch Mantel thought I had potential and came up to me and said, here's Bill Watts' number. Give him a call, tell him I sent you. I think you can do well out there. But Buddy Landell was behind Dutch Mantel in the Louisville Gardens locker rooms doing this. Like, don't go. And Buddy Landell was doing this, like driving a car. And I'm like, and I asked Buddy, he goes, and I'm imitating Buddy Landell. He goes, fuck, John, you hate these Memphis to Louisville drives? They're going to fucking tear your ass up going from Tulsa to fucking New Orleans. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, you're going to put, 7 to 1,200 miles on a week. And I had ADD, attention deficit disorder. My first road trip in Memphis to Louisville, we got to the motel in Louisville. My partner, Van Horn of the Beach Boys, goes in to check us in. And I was in his pickup trip my first day on the road. And I'm going, I can't do this. Wait a minute. I'm going to do this 3 times a week and do this every day, every week for the next 25 years. And I got like almost an anxiety. Like I'm like, I couldn't do it. Plane's a different story, but in the car anyway. So, but my tag team partner and I did go as the Beach Boys to Watts. We did a weekend of shows in Fort Worth and Tulsa, and they weren't interested in making us a tag team or anything like that. It was just going to be coming back as underneath or even enhancement which I was not really interested in after being a star in Memphis territory.
Right.
And the trips were so freaking long that I, to be honest with you, I don't know what would have happened because we never followed up. I told Van, I said, you can do what you want, but if you call him back, I can't do it. I just, I can't do it. That's the God's honest truth.
According to the date here, I'm looking, it was early, mid
February of
1987,
I think.
Yeah. And it was not that much longer that they were bought out by Crockett. Probably
it was the week they were bought out by Crockett. How's that?
Okay, there you go.
It was the week they were bought out by Crockett. I remember Jimmy Crockett being in the dressing room.
Oh, really?
And I tell a funny story about that, that he was looking at Bubba Rogers like an Oklahoma coach looking at a blue chip recruit. Jim Crockett was looking at Bubba like, and here's your plane tickets. If you have any problems. And I'm like, oh my God. But you know, Ray was a great worker, but I mean, it was weird, seeing Jimmy like subjugate himself so much to Bubba Rogers. But it was, the Freebirds just came on that weekend. They were going to do a thing. It was a really, we hit a good weekend. It was the time, Magnum TA came back from his injury, and Dusty Rhodes brought him out to the announcers table.
Right.
Missy Hyatt was there. Eddie Gilbert. It was and Dusty was doing the booking. So yeah, we caught a really good week.
Yeah, that's a great time period for them, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, so that was like that period, I think, for professional wrestling in general. There was a lot going on in the entire world of professional wrestling.
God, yeah.
To me, that was like my favorite. 87 to 89 and 89 is probably my favorite year for the NWA. I don't know. I think I'm partial, probably because the Flair Steamboat feud, maybe.
Right.
But I was still on board watching things like, World Class and NWA era, AWA, everything.
Yeah.
So you made some WWF appearances as well during that.
We did. When I came back to Chicago and I started the new Beach Boys. I think it was one of them.
Sonny Rogers.
Sonny Rogers.
Correct.
I think me and what's his name? Tom Rocky Stone said, would you and Sonny ever be interested in doing enhancement for WWF? And he's like, no. Before you give me an answer, it's $300 a night. You'll get a Lincoln Town car and stay at the Holodome and round trip plane tickets. And I'm like, how bad could this be? WWF, it's like going to wrestle for George Steinbrenner. And Sonny and I did it, and we can't find the tape, but they put us together in 2 tag teams, once against the Hart Foundation, and I forget the other time, but we made Mel Phillips, the black ring announcer at the time, announce us as the Beach Boys twice. So even though we weren't scheduled as the Beach Boys, we were matching outfits in the ring,
right? And
Mel Phillips announced, and Johnny Stewart, the Sonny Rogers, the Beach Boys. So it was cool. We it looked like we were, not strictly totally enhancement, and it was a great week, great 2 days. I wrestled Ted DiBiase. I did the Bobby Heenan backflip over the top rope, landing all the way on the floor. DiBiase comes back. He's like, because he wanted to be put over big. Vince McMahon took me aside between the tapes, told me to give me my number to Jay Strongbow. You can hear Honky talk about Jay Strongbow. He's killed more careers than AIDS. So
I hear a lot of good stories from him. I don't know if you're familiar with like Mario Mancini.
Oh my God, Mario talks all the time about him.
Yeah, I'm a part of the Mario school. So, I do commentary for when they run shows, and very good friends with him. And I've heard he talks very highly of Jay Strongbow, but it's, the first meetings where he was kind of afraid of him, I guess, because of how he came off.
Right.
So
he said, when I went up to him, he goes, Vince likes you. And I said, I that's awesome. I said, Bobby Heenan even came up to me. He goes, Vince likes you. And I went, oh, sorry. And I gave him my number. And now I don't hear from Vince for 2 weeks. The Milwaukee Jobbers, because that's who you want to listen to for your career advice. They're like, don't follow up with a phone call because Vince is just going to make you a jobber and you'll ruin your career. And back at that time, that wasn't not necessarily a falsehood. You know, you
Right.
get to be known as a Barry Horowitz, but no one ever said to me, see what he says. You don't know what is right. What do you know? He's going to make you a jobber. Maybe he's going to make you an undercard. Obviously, undercard. I was not. Obviously, an undercard, but maybe maybe he'll give you a little bit of a tiny push and give you a roadmap. And so I never followed up with that, which was career suicide to some degree. But I was 20 years old at the time. I figured I had a long time in the business, so that's how that ended. But it was great. Everything you hear about the WWFE, about their professionalism and organization and first class treatment, is all true. And Vince was a complete businessman. I'm going to tell you what I learned from Vince McMahon, and I'll shut up from here. I remember Vince McMahon at the last TV taping. Anybody that passed him, ring crew, grip, lighting, makeup, wardrobe, enhancement. Thank you for your help. Thank you for your help. See you next time. Thank you. Thanked everyone. Vince McMahon. So that always stuck with me. That always stuck with me for my entire business career.
Well, and tell me about Windy City. We touched upon it briefly, but you got to wrestle the original Midnight Express in Windy City Pro.
I got my PhD with Windy City, and Sam DeSera was a worker, but he worked full time for the city of Chicago. So you think this blue collar guy is an idiot and doesn't, but Sam followed what Vince McMahon did, which is when you book a town, you immerse it with talent, personal appearances, radio, TV, posters, commercials, public appearances. You freaking submerge the town, make them think the Academy Awards are coming. And Sam did that just like Vince McMahon. And Sam was we had 5,500 people one time at the amphitheater, 5,200, 4,800. Sam hired a public relations firm to launch Windy City Wrestling. You know, that's not something Dick the Bruiser or
right.
All these other cigar box promoters would have done. Hire a public relations firm to launch your wrestling promotion. And we were literally the ECW of Chicago from 87 to, Sam is the longest lasting independent wrestling promoter in the history of the wrestling business. If anyone doesn't know that. And it's a shame he gets no credit. He gets no publicity. No one talks about him. I think I'm one of the few guys that has ever even mentioned him for more than a minute or a second. And to not mention the most successful indie wrestling promoter longevity-wise is unbelievable. And, so it was Sonny Rogers and I as the Beach Boys. We wrestled the original Midnight, which was Dennis Condrey and Randy Rose.
Yep.
We wrestled Playboy Buddy Rose and Doug Summers. Can you imagine what you learned from those two in a tag team match? It was just, Doug Summers, just slow down and follow me, Beach Boy. It's just being, and they put us over. I mean, they weren't, they didn't, it was unbelievable. Eddie Gilbert was booking. Paul Heyman was booking. Paul and I were we travel partners for the road shows for Sam. It's just a great experience. I was on local Chicago TV every weekend. And still in college, so my parents could at least say, okay, this wrestling thing is, at least
it's doing something.
Matriculating for our son and stuff. And because you can't tell him George Steinbrenner of wrestling wants, wanted my phone number, but he's not calling me. They're like, why wouldn't he, it didn't, But so for them to see me. And then in that time, I went to Singapore and Malaysia to wrestle for Steve Ricard for his promotion for 2 weeks. And that was a hoot. I was with Snuka, Uncle Elmer, Pork Chop Cash, and Mark Lewin. So I was getting some really getting my licks in, and with some really seasoned people that really, like I said, gave me my PhD.
That's awesome. That's really awesome.
Yeah.
You mentioned Paul Heyman, driving with him and stuff like that. Now, of course, obviously, everybody knows who Paul Heyman is. Like years later, when he's part of ECW and stuff like that, did he ever contact you or Eddie Gilbert when he was there for booking or anything like that?
Well, Eddie Gilbert, when Jim Barnett told Eddie Gilbert in '89, I was in Chicago and I see this Johnny Stewart, who's a heel now. Jim Barnett said, Eddie Gilbert popped up and said, I know that kid. I booked that kid. Yes. And when Ric Flair, this was told by Cornette to me by Cornette and Heyman in the booking committee, that Eddie Gilbert and Flair kind of went, not toe to toe, but Eddie Gilbert really defended hiring me when Ric Flair wanted me to, rescind my contract. And I really appreciate that about Eddie. So yeah, Eddie was there and he was booking along with Paul Heyman. And Paul was not, I'll get to your, Paul was not the Paul Heyman that he is now. He was more calm.
Right.
When we were in the car together on the road, he was very calm. We talked like brothers. I like Paul. I say to everybody, I think I'm the only guy Paul's never lied to, because he's never lied to me. And in 1996, you have to understand something. There was no way to hear about ECW in 94. Folks, I'm not lying to you. Until I saw it on the Sunshine Network, because I was not a big gabber with the boys, coffee clutching, and the Chicago boys were isolated for some reason. We were not Minneapolis, we weren't Tampa, and we weren't Texas, and we weren't New York. We literally were isolated. I didn't know there was a Florida promotion in '88 still running. I didn't know Continental was still running enough where you could go down there and work full time. Because there was no central booking office. It was so ridiculous wrestling back then. It was so cigar box. And that I very rarely cut down the industry, but I do with that by not that every person in the wrestling industry should have had a booking list of promoters, their numbers, their addresses to call or write, to send your pictures in. Anyways, so I didn't know Paul was running. I thought it was a Todd Gordon once a week in Philadelphia, till I saw it on the Sunshine Network. And when I did, I called Paul, I think in 95, and I said, I'd love to come in. He's like, oh my God, Johnny, great, blah, blah, blah. I'll get back to you. And he actually called me back. So it's not like he was, and then the Milwaukee guys again said, oh, Johnny, you don't want to go there. It's like Wings, because I wrestled for Wings in Tokyo, in Japan. Yeah. Wow. With Victor Chiones. And they're like, it's the same thing as Wings. It's barbed wire matches. It's flames around the ring, baseball bats. And I'm like this. I'm like, I don't want any part of that. I'm going to show up in my suit, in my Halliburton, in my feathered boa robe against the Sandman with the, I just, I think Paul left a message and I just never followed up because I just didn't think it was my thing. That was stupid of me. I should have, again, at least gone there. And if they said, okay, you're going to butt this with the Sandman and the barbed wire, and then we're going to set the ring on fire, just pack my bag and be like, I'm going to go back to the airport. So, you always, I tell people, you always just take an offer to the point where we're going to work for you or it doesn't work for you. Because if I don't give lessons like in podcasts like this, well, it to me, it's not that to me, I want to benefit people to some degree. So when you get an opportunity and you think it might not be what you want, go to the ballpark with your baseball bat and see if you want to play for this team, metaphorically speaking. So that's my advice on that. And Paul, I love Paul Heyman. I haven't talked to him in 20 years, but I have nothing but the highest regards of what he's done and the fucking money he's made, because it's all that matters. So,
yeah. I used to go to a lot of ECW shows when they were in the area. I watched it on Madison Square Garden Network, 2:00 in the morning, around that time period. I used to get home from work, and then it was on. You know what I mean? On Saturday nights, 2:00 in the morning, and it was It was different, but it was not all barbed wire baseball bat matches and flames and stuff. There was a lot of technical wrestling in there. Yeah.
Rick, when I saw it on the Sunshine Network, my eyes were like this. Like, what the
And I was getting tapes of the earlier TV, because the earlier TV, they were still associated with the NWA, and it was kind of like, after NWA and WCW separated, it was the new, that's what the NWA was, I guess, or the main brand for it, whatever, however you want to word it. And I enjoyed it. You know what I mean? The Savoys were kind of dying off, like, as an independent. I really enjoyed their TV, so it was kind of like that. But then in 1994, it just kind of skyrocketed into all the crazy stuff.
Unbelievable. Right.
Secondhand Heroes and Home for Wayward Villains is a comic book shop and gaming store that also features Magic the Gathering and D&D. Located at 18184 Leesville Road in Evington, Virginia, Secondhand Heroes is your one-stop shop for you to get your nerd on. Open 7 days a week at 11 a.m. They don't close until the dice stop rolling. They buy, sell, trade, barter, and haggle, specializing in collectible toys, both vintage and modern, comics, Magic the Gathering, video games, console, and arcade cabinets to play, all set to free play. Host your game night with us. Monday night D&D video game competitions, and so much more. Something for the collector and gamer in us all. Call 434-317-0121 or shoot us an email with any questions to secondhandheroesva@gmail.com. Note, secondhandheroesva@gmail.com. That's 2ND, handheroesva@gmail.com. Come game with us.
It's AIWF. Wanna see the best wrestling? Where to connect? The squared circle, the place you have to earn your respect. So get right with the program or you'll get left. AIWF across the US and all over the globe. We are live and direct. So tune and see who wins and lose stuff for the Lord. This match just got you over.
So you mentioned wings. I do have this in my notes. You took, I guess it was an incident with Corporal Kirshner.
Yeah, they, Doug Gilbert and Hugh Morris, Bill DeMont, and Corporal Kirshner. I did something they got me drunk. You know, instead of going to my hotel room, like the illustrious Johnny Stewart always did, I said to myself, you know, your way of in the wrestling business is not really working. This is a connected, orientated business, connections. What do they call that? Not like it's networking. And I never understood that because things came so easy to me. You know, like with Jerry Lawler, I was a star immediately. I don't have to network. And I didn't drink a lot, so I hated going to the bars and doing business, but that's the wrestling business. So I remember going, look, I don't socialize. I'm going to socialize tonight. Big mistake. They get me drunk and they're H-bombing me. Never take a beer from a wrestler unless you open it. And I did something disrespectful to Mr. Pogo, which is not my personality. I'm very respectful, especially of the older guys in the wrestling business. And I blew like sugar on him off a spoon, just stupid. And that pissed them off. And they kept H-bombing me and getting me drunk. And Bill DeMont got really vicious verbally with me. And I left. I walked around the parking lot. I came back and it was just Kirshner. And he's like, you got to leave. You're leaving this tour right now. I'm like, I'm not leaving this tour. I don't have my money. And I got a week left. I'm not leaving. And you can believe this or not, but, you know, he didn't have a knife or a gun on him. So all I could do is get a beating. And he said, well, then we're going to go in the parking lot and see you leave. So I took off my glasses. I knew I was going to get my ass kicked. When I took off my glasses and put them in his fanny pack, Mike's eyes went like, I'm like, Mike, all you're going to do is beat the shit out of me. I mean, you know, whether that be true or not. And when I got up to go to the right, the next thing I know, he was on top of me. I had passed out because he knocked me out. He broke my jaw and he was beating the shit out of my forehead, which was already gigged. And there was blood all over my face. And the front desk clerk came, called the police. It was a nightmare. I had to take a taxi back to Narita Airport, which was about 100 miles away. The taxi fare was $200. I'm bleeding in the cab. My jaw is broke. All I have is $150. I had to hide in the airport bathroom from the taxi cab driver who was looking for me in the airport to pay the rest of the fare. After I knew the coast was clear, Continental Airlines got me on a flight into Seattle from Narita, and then Seattle to Chicago. And the stewardesses were packing my chin with ice and blood still trickling. I even twisted my ankle. It was fucking horrible. And it was at that point I'm like, maybe not the wrestling business is not going to be my full, my lifelong career. And when you have incidences like that, you have to at some point say to yourself, do I belong? I'll leave it at this. one of the cathartic things, because it was traumatic for me to go through that. I was 24 years old. But Howard Cosell said, Howard Cosell said something about 4 years ago, and I am going through this cathartic phase in my career. That's why I'm starting to do podcasts. Is he said, I was a great lawyer. This is Howard Cosell. I was a great lawyer. I knew I would make millions of dollars as a lawyer, but it didn't suit me. The 3 years it would take to settle a case and the going to the law library. I was great at it, but it didn't suit me. What suited me was calling sports. And that, like a burden lifted off my shoulder, like I was a great worker. I was even probably a really, really good technician. I was a good worker. I could talk you in the building. I could not hurt my opponent. I could return him to his family that night and still get the fans involved in our match. But did it suit me? Did the travel suit me? Did the psychopaths in our business, did I want to be around that for 20 years? Enough, Rick, let me just, enough where I could get to a point to be Jesse Ventura or Sergeant Slaughter, guys that habitually traveled by themselves, that never had to mingle and whatnot. And I don't know, still to this day, I just don't know. The road was crazy. When I went on the road for WCW in 1990 for 10 days with the Steiners and Pillman and Johnny Ace and Hawk, it was just, the road was crazy. It was crazy back then. It was the Wild West. I just don't know if that would have suited me. I'm just being professionally honest. So after the wings thing and sitting on a plane bleeding with your jaw broke, you have to, I think anybody would re-examine exactly what they're doing in their career.
Sounds like it. Yeah, I think you're right. I want to go over some AWA matches while I know we're kind of getting off because that's where I'm mostly familiar with. I mean, I've seen you elsewhere, but that's where I'm mostly familiar with.
Of course.
You got to wrestle guys like I have it here on my notes. Derek Dukes, Tommy Jammer. Tell me about working with guys like that.
Derek, I loved. We worked well together. Derek and I must have wrestled each other 30 times. Yeah. Derek would have the gel in his hair, and I hated that. He'd always wear hot. So I was like Andre the Dukes, get out, no one, get out to the Macho Man. But I loved Derek was one of my best friends in the AWA. Tommy Jammer, one of the nicest guys in the world. But Tommy Jammer was like wrestling the Ultimate Warrior, and I will give you the Hercules Hernandez story, the quick one, where he said, when you're on the road and you're working the Ultimate Warrior night after night, there is no reprieve. You wake up in the morning thinking, oh my God, a new day, but you're sick to your stomach because you realize in 8 hours, you're going to get the shit beat out of you by the Ultimate Warrior. And Tommy Jammer was stiff. He wouldn't sell for me. I told Greg and Vern they would never talk to him. And eventually he was phased out of being on the road with me. In '89, and so I would get Paul Diamond and the Menace or Baron von Raschke, who was I was doing a lot of independence, WCW, AWA. I wrestled every day in May of 1990. So when you were at a spot show somewhere in Minnesota, dead tired, and you'd see your name and Baron von Raschke's name next to it, you were like, oh my God. 10 minutes of walk and talk, get the clock, go home, go to the hotel room, order a pizza. It was great. But yeah, Tommy Jammer was a fucking handful. Oh,
were they still sort of associated with Eddie Sharkey's promotion at the time?
No,
was it PWA at the time?
PWA, no, but they used some of Eddie's guys at times, but not many. It was kind of getting phased out. Yeah.
Because I think a lot of his guys were coming over probably in that time period, and they were putting them on TV. It was mostly a lot of it was put them on TV and stuff.
Exactly.
They were really getting cherry picked at the time by WWF, so they really needed a lot of talent. Because
very true.
So
Well, Tommy, I'm a guy. I like to put the baby over. I like to make him break character so he knows. Oh, Johnny Stewart, he's going to take care of me tonight. That's important, folks. When you're wrestling a 250-pound guy that's tired and frustrated and on the juice, you want to make sure he knows you're going to take care of him. So, and
Yeah.
Tommy just didn't get that. He just didn't didn't understand that if he sold and got the sympathy, he would have been over like $1 million. But he just couldn't let himself do it. He just didn't grasp it.
What about teaming with Mike George and part of the tag tournament?
Yeah, Mike George and I teamed against Greg Gagne and Paul Diamond.
Yep.
Sheik Adnan was our opponent. It was the first time, and a lot of people have told me this, it was the first time a lot of people that knew me said you looked, acted, called the match like you were a freaking veteran for the first time. And that's because I was in the ring with Mike, Greg Gagne, and Paul Diamond. And, you know, how could you not, even if you have a little bit of talent, get that rub of the fluidity? And I just, you know, we called nothing and everything, all the spots worked. And it was really that was a turning point for my career, actually. It's funny that you mentioned that I really felt, and others did, that I was becoming a veteran.
I don't feel like Mike gets enough talked about these days, because he actually did a signing, like a private signing locally, that a friend of mine brought him in, and I ended up getting some pictures from him because I'm like, damn, like how does he even get in touch with him? Because like I don't even see, he doesn't have any social media presence, nothing.
Right.
You know what I mean? And, you know, I made sure that as soon as I saw that, I got in there. I'm like, nobody ever talks about Mike George and how great he actually was, because with the WWA, and, you know, he was there towards the end
Kansas
of the AWA
City,
as well. Yeah.
in Kansas City with Bulldog Brown, I think. And
Yep. Yeah. It's just, he was a phenomenal worker. And he just, like I said, 40 years later, just not talked about. It's so crazy.
Rick, it's interesting. I think that your viewers would find this interesting. It's interesting. The nicest person, the easiest person to deal with I have ever met in the wrestling business was one of its biggest stars, The Rock. We hired The Rock when we did our own AWA Wrestling Superstars for an autograph session in Brooklyn. We paid him $32,000. Highest payday at an independent show ever. $32,500. We paid him for an hour and a half autographs. The easiest guy to work with, the nicest guy to work with. So the biggest star was one of the nicest, if not the nicest person I've ever met in wrestling. And we're getting back to Mike George. It's funny when you would meet so many veterans. They were so relaxed, decent people. They didn't do ribs. They were nice to you. They just wanted to go in, do a good match, come back out, go out to dinner. It was a pleasure being in the ring with aged veterans. It really was.
You just mentioned the AWA All-Stars. That was Dale Gagne.
Yes, correct. Right.
Correct. And you were associated with that?
That's correct. I was his booker. And his champion that would put over all of the WWF talent that we brought in, on the main event. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I remember when that guy, I think Connecticut had a local affiliate. I'm not in this. I'm going back 20 some odd years ago.
Yeah,
probably.
Connecticut had affiliate. Yeah.
Yep. And I remember going to one show because it was based out of a wrestling school, and I went to one show because back then 20 some odd years ago, the internet was not really a thing, really, and you barely heard about shows. And I just remember driving forever to get to this damn show. So it was like in the middle of the woods or whatever. And
oh my God.
Yeah, it was interesting when I found that out that there was an AWA affiliate locally, or the AWA. There was an AWA still active, but I guess that didn't go over too well. Eventually, after some time.
Oh my God, we lasted 8 years. We registered Vern Gagne. We realized Vern Gagne never, not trademarked, but never registered the name AWA, or American Wrestling Association in Minnesota. Folks, I'm not lying. I have the paperwork. So I did. Not as a dig to him, but if he's going to leave the AWA abandoned, surely I'm going to pick up the Coca-Cola formula and use it in business. But we didn't call it Vern Gagne's AWA. It was AWA Wrestling Superstars. We lasted 8 years, about 55 shows. We regularly had 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people. Dale did the Sam DeCiro, Vince McMahon, with local promoters. It was all sold shows, flying people everywhere. We had 3 shows in one night on 2 different occasions. We used stars from Hacksaw. Sergeant Slaughter was our biggest star. King Kong Bundy, Jimmy Hart, George Steele, the Road Warriors, the Bushwhackers, the Patriot. It was just a great 8-year run. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. When Eric Bischoff was in WCW, did you ever talk to him? Because I know that he was there in the AWA while you were there. Did you ever talk to him, maybe trying to get in there?
Never returned my phone calls. And
Really?
It's later on learned that he did not like me. He took exception that when I started with Vern was telling the office, we got this millionaire's kid coming in and he's really rich and this and that. And Eric's getting his car repossessed. I didn't know this.
Yeah.
I never had a bad word with Eric, but Greg told me, we just hired this jabroni announcer. Don't smarten him up. So when I would do interviews with Eric, I wouldn't even talk to him. Now, I'm sure he probably, took that as being rude. Here's this rich guy's kid that's getting money thrown at him, and I'm getting my car repossessed. I can understand Eric's position with me. And I wasn't from Minneapolis. So when Eric would go party with the Destruction Crew and Dale Gagne and Paul Diamond and stuff, I wasn't in that group. I was in Chicago. Right. So Eric did not like me for a lot of years. Yeah. And never answered my call and cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars. But this is pro wrestling. It's you're left up to the booker's vices, and that's it.
What you worked for what the hell was the guy? Paul Apperstein's AWF as well?
I did. I got a great story about that. Go ahead.
I used to get this late at night as well. There's one of those random independent companies that would show up on TV for Saturday nights at for 6 months or whatever, and then disappear. 3 months, disappear. And he actually had 2 runs doing that because they went out of, I think they did 2 seasons, disappeared, and then all of a sudden a year later they came back and did another show and then disappeared again and then never came back at all. But you also took on Tom Brandy while there as well. So
who was wrestling as Johnny Gunn.
Yes.
You folks, you want to hear a funny story? You're like, I can't believe wrestling was this back-asswards. It's like 94. My aunt calls me. We are so proud of you. Everyone is talking about your return with wrestling, and you're going to be at the Cicero Stadium. I am telling you, we're going to have 100 people come watch you. And I talked to Clara. She said the newspaper article on you. I'm like this. She's like, the newspaper, it's a full page, all about your career, and your aunt is so proud of you. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? She's like, well, you're wrestling next Saturday at the Cicero Stadium. And I'm like, no, I'm not. She's like, yes, you are. It's a full page in the Chicago newspaper. Local boy coming back to, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, Aunt Anthony's, can you call Claire or whatever her name was, have her read you who is the wrestling organization, WWF, or okay, I'll call you back. My aunt calls me back. She said, it says AWF. Rick, in my life, I'm like, what? So I call a Windy City guy. I said, who the hell is AWF? He's like, that's Joey Bag of Donuts, who was a kind of a wrestling manager for DeCiro. I said, well, does anybody get his number? An hour later, I get Joey Maggs was his name. Not the East Coast Joey Maggs, but Joey Maggs. We called him Joey Bag of Donuts because he was Italian and he was a big guy. He looked like a Sopranos character. And he calls me. He's like, hey, Johnny, what's going on? I'm like, what's going on? Why is there a Chicago newspaper doing a full-page article on me? He's like, oh, it came out great. Isn't it? It's going to, the publicity we're getting off it. I'm like, off of what? I'm wrestling for you? He's like, yeah. I'm like, nobody called me. He's like, wait, Sergeant Slaughter didn't call you? I'm like, no. He's like, wait a minute. Did Paul Epperstein call you? I said, no. He said, no one called you. I said, no. He goes, can you make the show? I'm like, I think I can. I'm like, well, what kind of place are you running? He's like, Johnny, it's been crazy. We're a startup group and bear with us. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I wrestled Tom. The first time I met Tom Brandy. Tom Brandy, if I started a wrestling organization, would be my consigliere. Just one of the smartest, calmest, sensible guys in the wrestling industry. I just texted him 3 weeks ago for the first time in 7 years. I love Tom Brady. And then the next night, I wrestled Chris Adams at the Hammond Civic Center. Here's on the card, 210 people in the audience. Here's on the card: Coco Beware, Terry Taylor, Chris Adams, Johnny Stewart, Tom Brady, Bob Orton Jr., Sergeant Slaughter, Tito Santana, Hercules Hernandez, and a referee. Did I say Terry Taylor and another guy? 210 people. They must have lost $20,000 on that show. So I knew that I knew that they were in huge trouble. You know, and that didn't last very long. So, but yeah, that's my funny story. Being on a show, full page ad, and I was never booked. Welcome to wrestling.
That's crazy. Wrestling is crazy. Trust me.
It is.
It's every day.
That
there's
shit
something
crazy. Oh my God. Crazy.
But I love it. You know, it's fun. You can't. I can't give it up and walk away.
It is. It is.
You know, I believe that maybe Ken Resnick was there as well, at least for a little while. Was he there?
If he was there at TV, he was not at these 2 live shows. No, I don't remember but I think Resnick did do some announcing or color commentary for him.
Jimmy Brunzell was there.
Jimmy Brunzell was there.
And, he did.
Greg Valentine.
Yep, Greg Valentine, Tito Santana. You know,
Tito and Sarge were the main bookers. So
so
Sarge, I worked with in AWA, so normally he hired me. You know.
Yeah, I think that Tito was the champion, and after the company closed, I think he worked independent shows for years, still with the AWF title.
Why not?
I'm not kidding. I mean, why not? So
I believe it.
I think he had some sort of after Paul Apperstein or whatever. Maybe he had some sort of buy-in or something like that. I could be wrong on that, but I think he did.
Yeah, Tito and Sarge were getting huge money for booking a once every 2 week show promotion. Sarge and Tito were getting huge guarantees, like just under 6 figures. Yeah.
So what are you up to these days? And do you still watch wrestling at all?
I flip it on to see what's going on. It's not my format, but I am so tickled to death that if another wrestler hurts your feelings, you can complain about it. That would have been great back in my era.
That's what Twitter's
I'm not even
for.
joking. Yeah. He broke my jaw. Could you do something, human resources? But the money that everyone's making, the easy schedule. I know it's not fashionable for an old timer like me to not be bitter, but I'm not bitter. I can't be happier for the industry and everyone in the industry. I mean that sincerely. And I am semi-retired from the automobile industry. I still have a part-time consulting gig. And when people say consulting, like you're making it up, no, I literally work 3 days a week for a dealer group, consulting for him. And I'm producing this crazy documentary where an accident, I'm proving the government's, oh God, it's going to sound crazy, but I'm proving the government's involvement and relationship with off-planet extraterrestrial biological entities. And it's called Project Aquarius. That's the project and the program. And I've had intelligence operatives come forward to me for the past 6 years. When it comes out, people are going to be like, what did Jon Stewart get himself into? My phone's been tapped. It's been a crazy 6 years. It's going to be really, and this is totally a shoot. I'm not joking around in the least bit. And when it comes out finally, hopefully later this year, I think people's jaws are going to drop of what I was shown, the documents I was given, the video I was given, and the witness testimony that I got on camera. So it's called Hunting Victor, and I think it's going to blow a lot of people's minds. So look for that.
Sounds like something I'd want to see, that I would watch.
Yeah.
So,
and I totally fell into it on accident. That's not unusual, so that's what I've been married for 25 years, knock on wood, came out of the wrestling business alive, which, when you're wrestling in the 80s and 90s, it's like being a race car driver in the 50s and 60s, where you'd race on Saturday and you'd go to a funeral on Sunday because everybody was getting killed. So to come out of the 80s and 90s alive and not addicted to drugs or, my mind all messed up, without any serious health issues and married for 25 years. I'm so freaking lucky, Rick. And I know I wasn't a superstar, but I was in the wrestling business from 86 to 2012. I am so fucking lucky that I am sitting here with you. And to look at the wrestling industry, I just can't be happier. I really am the happiest I've ever been in my life right now. I'm proud to say it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I want to thank you for joining me today. I really do. This has been a blast. It really has.
Well, thank you for having me. Anytime anybody wants to listen to me bloviate, I will finally say, I know I disappointed a lot of my colleagues and fans of not reaching my potential. And for that, I apologize. And I don't want people to be shocked as an old-time wrestler, but I take accountability for it. It was my fault. So don't blame the wrestling business. It was mostly my fault, and I'm okay with that. And I'm proud that I can blame myself, unlike a lot of other of my contemporaries. But for those of you that watched me and enjoyed me, I thank you for doing that over the years. And thank you for allowing me to come into your homes and bloviate for an hour and a half. And Rick, thank you for allowing me to come on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.